2025 was a big year for democracy across Europe, with several countries going to the polls. Right-wing parties made gains in countries like Germany and Portugal, while Moldova was caught between a choice between a pro-Russian or a pro-EU government. So, how has Europe's political landscape changed over the past year? Hello and welcome to Roundtable's Year in Review. I'm Enda Brady and today we look at some of the key European elections of 2025. Moldova's parliamentary election was seen as a referendum on whether the country moved closer to Russia or to Europe. The results saw the Liberal pro-EU PAS party retain its parliamentary majority, while pro-Russian opposition parties still gained significant support. We looked at whether this win would make the path to EU membership easier for Europe's poorest country. The people of Moldova, your country, have spoken. They've said yes to Europe, yes overwhelmingly to the European Union, and a future that does not involve Russia. It's a pretty strong statement.
Yes, indeed. These elections show that Moldova took a decisive turn towards European Union membership. Clearly, these elections were about geopolitical orientation, which is very distinct from other types of elections that you see throughout the world. I mean, here clearly you have foreign policy at the center of political campaign. So we have two camps: pro-Russia camp and pro-EU camp. And the pro-EU camp, governed by Sandu administration, the PAS political party, achieved victory and secured majority in order to continue its goal to have Moldova integrated into EU by 2028. Let's see how successful they will be. But clearly, this also validated the last year's referendum held in Moldova, which aimed to amend the Moldovan constitution to include EU integration as a strategic plan of Moldova.
Thanks, Lucia. Ben, to you, give us your reaction to this result, because more than 50% voted for PAS, the ruling party, pro-Europe. This was quite an endorsement of all their plans and policies.
Yes, it was. On the surface, the ruling party PAS got over 51% in a parliament with 101 seats. So they've got a clear majority. There's no need to do a coalition. And they voted to follow Sandu's policy, which is basically EU accession, and go the Western route. However, there were lots of problems with the elections, and it wasn't entirely free or fair, in so much as there was a lot of what we described as taking a leaf out of Putin's book, managed democracy, in so much as the goal to push through and make sure that they stay on this European path in the face of like heavy Russian interference, meant that the government used its so-called administrative resources in order to ensure that it skewed the vote towards the EU parties. And that's in the face, I mean, Russians were pouring money into it, so it became a battleground. As our colleague just said, it was a geopolitical battleground between a choice between East and West. Nevertheless, they did things like there was only 2 polling stations opened in Russia, and you've got 400,000 Moldovans living there, whereas polling stations in the EU were working fine. Transnistria, which is a breakaway republic, is also technically part of, under the constitution, Moldova, but again, there are reports that there was no polling there, and that's a pro-Russian region which is under occupation by Russian military. So again, it's not exactly free and fair, and so on and so forth. There was a lot.
The result stands, Ben. The result stands. Let's bring in Alexander. Alexander, why was Russia so interested in this election? If we were to believe these allegations of interference in the democratic process, why would Russia be so interested in a tiny country, 2.4 million people?
Well, look, first of all, about the interference, I don't think many Russians feel any shame about this interference. Most Russians who are interested in international politics would tell you that the United States, for instance, has been doing it for decades. So if the leader of the so-called free world has been doing this for many, many years, why shouldn't Russia do the same thing, right? Now, about the interest in Moldova, it's obviously it's an important geopolitical area, right? And it's between Ukraine and Romania, between Ukraine and NATO. But the problem here is that I think a major factor behind the results of these elections was the war in Ukraine. Because to understand it, I think it's important to understand that the war in Ukraine is not a war between Russia and Ukraine. It's a war between Russia and NATO. So if there is a serious confrontation between pro-Russian forces in Moldova and NATO, Moldova will become a new battlefield in the same war.
You think the people in Moldova were scared of this happening?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Let's bring Christian in on that point. Christian, you're originally from Romania. I should tell our Roundtable viewers, so you know this area like the back of your hand. Give us your reading of the result.
Well, I think it's definitely an impressive result for the pro-European forces. If we were to have this discussion like 17 or 18 years ago, no one would have thought that something like this is possible, an absolute majority. And I think the PAS party needs to be congratulated because it managed to coagulate all of the pro-European forces. Because in the past, you would have squabbling between them. And I agree with our colleague here that the war in Ukraine has had an important impact on these elections because it allowed pro-European actors in the country to come together and understand that, let's say, membership to the European Union is very much at hand if Moldova shows that it's committed. So a lot of Moldovans who came out to vote, and I think there were people waiting hours at various polling stations across Europe to vote, came out specifically because they see the future of Moldova with Europe and not going back in the past and embracing a future with Russia.
In Germany, the far-right AfD party saw its support surge, coming in second place in the country's election. Friedrich Merz's Christian Democrats won, but needed to form a coalition. He refused to enter talks with the AfD, leaving the door open for centrist parties to make a deal. We travelled to Berlin and looked at how the AfD co-leader Alice Weidel led her party to political success.
Let's talk about Alice Weidel and the AfD, Ben. A lot of political capital has been made out of the immigration situation and various different attacks carried out by non-German nationals. Where does she see herself going now? Almost 21% of the vote. What next for the AfD?
Yeah, it's only been around 12 years, and suddenly it's a mainstream party. It's doubled its stake from last year. And there's even been speculation that, one of the options open to Merz is to do a coalition with the AfD. But it's too early for that. The Brandmauer, this firewall against fascism, nobody would accept it. So I think she's looking specifically at the next elections. And she came in second, and this whole immigration issue is a hot button issue. And obviously with great appeal to the voters, 20% voted her for the party. And so I think she's looking to improve her position for the next elections and playing, like Marine Le Pen in France, she's playing a long game and because of this resistance to their far-right views that, no one's going to deal with her, but progressively as we go on, she'll tone it down, she'll, become more moderate, she'll look at some other issues, make herself more presentable, in the same way that Marine Le Pen has been trying to do, in the hope that she can get into a coalition in the next elections.
So Ed, how much pressure does that then put on Merz that he will be trying to achieve things, turn Germany around, get it working again, all the while Alice Weidel is breathing down his neck?
I think the real way out of this is to create more economic growth and then, reduce this kind of perceived sense of scarcity. And then a lot of these, the fears that the AfD is able to play on become less relevant. I think that's the real long-term way to avoid the rise of the far right. There is, of course, this temptation to just kind of copy them. But as we've seen in a lot of developed countries, if there's a sort of real, xenophobic anti-migrant party on offer and then a centrist party that mimics them, people kind of just want the real deal. And so it's going to come down to actually solving the economic problems in Germany and not just kind of chasing this rhetoric on migration. Because there's actually a lot of, there was recent polling about this from the election. And 15% of Germans say migration is the most important issue. About 55% overall say they're concerned in general. So those are high numbers, and it's one of the top issues, but it's not the dominant issue. 18% say Social Security is their main concern, which speaks to this idea that the economic challenges are the way to avoid these risks that the others have talked about.
Anya, how did you feel seeing a far-right party like the AfD rise to such prominence in such a short space of time as a German?
Frankly, I'm probably less worried than many other Germans. Simply because I've lived for a long time in the UK. I've seen Nigel Farage in whatever party he has been in. And it seems a more global sentiment, right? If you look at Italy, you have Giorgia Meloni. You look at France, and so Germany has always been lagging a little bit behind in these types of developments. Now we are there as well. I am less worried about something atrocious like the Holocaust repeating itself, and I think this is part of the worry that Germany has this very dark history, because we have now a very different structure of governance. We have a federal system, it's much less centralized, and so I think there will be also a learning effect that the AfD will not be able to do that much, because they have come in power in several cities, areas in the East. And in the end, what will they be able to do? They won't be able to deliver on their promises. People will figure this out. We've seen a similar movement with the far left before. So overall, I am not particularly worried.
John, to you, just come in on that point. I mean, Weidel is a very clever operator. She's going from strength to strength. Can you see a position where she just continues to grow, or is this the peak of support now for the AfD?
Well, I'm sort of half with Anya in her assessment that this is a global phenomenon. It's certainly a European phenomenon. There's nothing specifically German about this at all. And it does annoy me when you have British and American and other media who always sort of, the way they've been covering the AfD the last few days, they're sort of almost portraying it as we're just a couple of goose steps away from Germany retreating into fascism and stuff. There is nothing German about this that doesn't pertain to other countries as well. However, the big danger, and it seems so strange to be thinking about this, is the American far right, otherwise known as now the American state, Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and others, spending the next 4 or 5 years, along with their now close ally, Vladimir Putin, fueling, funding these far-right parties. It's like a domino effect. Hungary has gone onto the dark side. Slovakia, the Czech Republic is about to happen later this year, one assumes. Poland is very much up in the air. These are not especially dark times for Germany, but these are very dark times for all of Europe, which includes Germany.
Now, in Portugal, a political crisis saw its parliament collapse, and the PM, Luis Montenegro's Democratic Alliance, returned to office without a majority. But it was the far-right Chega party which saw a huge increase in votes, overtaking the Socialists to become Parliament's second largest force. Ahead of the election, we examined the rise of Chega. I want to talk about this far-right party you have in Portugal, Chega, currently polling 21%. And I read in the Portuguese newspapers they are doubling their budget for this election. So they must be quite confident. Why are Chega so confident?
The truth is, The far right is increasing in the past few years, but our coalition and agreement policy is very well defined. We are running in this election in coalition with the Christian Democratic Party and hope to gain the trust of the Portuguese people. We also know that there may be room for some understandings with the Liberal Party. We must wait for the final result to know what will happen. But there is one thing I am certain of. Our Prime Minister has stated several times that there will be no agreements with the far-right party, Chega, and we will stand firm on that decision for several reasons. Because it is not a reliable party and does not bring the stability that the country needs, because the political proposals are irresponsible, and I must say very socialist, and because this party does not have people of quality to govern the country, and I hope Portuguese people see that.
Thank you, João Pedro. Nelson, to you, what do Chega offer the Portuguese people then? What's their big solution to all the problems they see with regard to, I'm guessing, immigration and everything we hear from the far right?
So we have to say that the Chega discourse is mainly focused on this couple of things. So corruption, and he's always talking about corruption, about how every party that governed Portugal since 74 has been exactly the same, corrupted, the political system is corrupt, we need to change the political system and so on, but also focus a lot on immigration and tries to connect immigration with security. And basically, there is this idea that the party is always trying to put forward that we now feel more insecure because you have a lot of immigration and that is connected. Nevertheless, we know for the data that we have that there is no connection between immigration and security, and in fact, we don't have in the last couple of years more violent crime than before. So the party is always focusing on that and really heavily on immigration. But we have to say that to some point it has been successful in shaping the political discourse and debate in Portugal, because right now we have both the Social Democratic Party, both the Socialist Party, talking also a lot on this. It's a huge topic in Portugal. So at some point it shaped the agenda, but also shaped the policies.
Mafalda, Chega talk a lot about corruption in Portuguese politics, but I read an incredible story. One of their politicians got kicked out because he got in trouble with the police for allegedly stealing suitcases at Lisbon airport. I mean, that has to be one of the strangest political stories I've ever heard.
Yes, absolutely. And I think this is also one of the things that unites all other parties in Portugal, is the belief that when one looks at the percentage of politicians or members of parliament that were accused of crimes, it's clear that Chega is likely to be the one with the highest number. But that is a good example. There was an MP, a Chega MP, who was accused of stealing pieces of luggage while traveling from the Açores to Lisbon, and then selling some of those items allegedly stolen while he was in Lisbon. Again, this is an ongoing investigation as far as I'm aware, but it's an interesting story. And there are other cases as well. There are accusations of allegedly, again, pedophilia and similar very complicated and ethical cases. But I want to say that as well, that Chega talks a lot about corruption, but the latest Eurobarometer on corruption, which is from 2024, asked the Portuguese if they'd been victims or if they'd witnessed corruption, and only 1% said that they had, when the average in the EU is 5%. So, Chega, as I see it, it's a balloon of hate, and that balloon is being deflated gradually. In fact, they've lost a lot already in the polls. I think they're going to continue to lose support in the next few years because people are tired, in fact, but they see that hate and that anger and shouting is not the solution. The solution is to work together and to create a better Portugal with better pay, and that needs serious people and not shouting. It needs real work, and that real work is something that Livre does, and I know that other parties as well do. And I hope that in the next elections, Chega's balloon will decrease, and that will support stability for the next few years.
In Poland, pro-Trump nationalist Karol Nawrocki narrowly clinched victory in its presidential election, a shock result which saw him edging out the Liberal mayor of Warsaw, Rafał Trzaskowski. We travelled to the Polish capital ahead of this election to discuss allegations of Russian interference and discover how the contest had polarised Polish society.
Talk me through the significance of this election.
As in every democracy, the election for the presidential, so the first person in town, in country, is always the most important election. Although paradoxically, taking into account the Polish political system, we've got the strongest legitimacy, taking the election of the presidential election, with the relatively low privileges in the power system. So, but anyhow, always, if we look into the transition period from 1989, the presidential election were always important, concentrate a lot of social interests. So yes, it is important, the first point. The second one, it is also important if you take into account the discussion which is now being held in Poland, not only in Poland, because this general approach and the general tensions between the, let's say, the society and the elites is very strong. In Germany, in Italy, in France, we've got the same. We reflect this discussion also in Poland. So that is why it also shows the path in which direction the Poland is going to go. And the third point, why it is so important, I think, for the government as well and for the whole system. Because today the president is a part of executive power. Is working or not working, collaborating or not collaborating with the government. Today, the government, which has been elected after a very, very strong and social dispute, political dispute almost 2 years ago, sometimes the Prime Minister and the government is telling the society that, well, we would perform better, but unfortunately we've been stopped and blocked by the president. So this is the answer. Whether the president is going to be from the same camp as the government, then there will be no exclusion for saying we are not doing, we are not performing, because our president is from our side, or if because the margin and the difference between the leading party candidate and the opposition party candidate is really very narrow. So it is very difficult to predict the final outcome. So the question is whether the president is going to represent and to support the opposition parties and playing not the same game with the government, especially that after this election, we are going to be prepared to the next general election, to the next parliamentary election. So this is really very important, both from taking into account the political system and the general political geography.
Thanks, Jadwiga. Jan, it's not just a figurehead role, is it, President of Poland? This is someone who will have power, defence policy, for example, and as Jadwiga said, cooperating with the Prime Minister and the ruling coalition. It's a very significant job.
Yeah, I think that Jadwiga already gave us a pretty robust answer why this election matters. But indeed, the president is not necessarily a figurehead. He's got a couple, in fact, a handful of powers given to him by the constitution that give him primarily not a positive power, but a negative power, which means that we've got government which emerged from the parliamentary elections. They got the majority in the House, and they are basically running the country. but they can't enact their reforms. They can't really carry out most of the promises that they campaigned on if they don't have a cooperating president. Why? Because the president got this one extremely powerful constitutional function, which is the veto power. When he doesn't like the law that the government enacts, he can simply say that I won't sign it, there won't be my signature, and he sends it back to the chambers of the parliament, so Sejm and Senate.
So he can obstruct
He can
a lot
obstruct,
of what the government...
and they do have a power to overtake his veto, but this is such a majority, 3/5 or 60% of the House, which is unachievable in our political conditions of massive polarization, which basically is a thing here since 2005 or even earlier.
I just want to bring in Przemysław.
Yeah, okay.
Przemysław, what would you say are the key issues facing the voters then this weekend?
No, I would say that I would still want to say more about this polarization. The process here is that the government cannot, in their own opinion, to fulfill their promises, which leaves the voters disappointed. And if they won't win, this is going to be probably leading to the fall of this coalition. And on the other side, the contemporary opposition party, which was government for 8 years, now there's a lot of politicians from the party are facing different kind of persecutions for nepotism, corruption, and situations like that.
And you think it is a polarized electorate in Poland right now?
Less than, let's say, a few years ago, but still you got two main candidates, which one have like 30%, other 25%, so it's more than 55%. Okay, a few years ago it was about 70% for both candidates, for both parties, but still I think it's polarized. Still, these two main camps are organizing the Polish political scene.
That's all from us for now. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all the team here, we wish you a very happy new year. Goodbye, and thank you for watching.